Amnesia Dark Descent is the first in the Amnesia series, released on September 8th in the grand old year of 2010. It was developed and published by Frictional Games and features exactly 0 combat. Amnesia Dark Descent is more akin to horror adventure with some survival elements thrown in. With the exception of a couple areas, enemies aren't prevalent, letting you explore without too much hassle. Much like Visage's Dwayne, Daniel, our main character, does not do well in the dark. Tinder and lamp oil are a must to make it through this game alive. However, succumbing to wounds or psychological fear isn't as punishing as you would think. The game autosaves fairly often, so you won't be sent back very far. And sometimes the enemies are just no longer present for your next attempt. Just as the game says in the very beginning, winning isn't the focus. It wants you to immerse yourself in this macabre tale. So with that said, let's dive into Amnesia Dark Descent.
Don't forget.
The scene begins with the voice of our protagonist. It seems he's having trouble remembering and tries to keep in mind the most important things. Who he is, that he has a mission, and that he's in danger.
Don't forget. I must stop him. Focus.
This has set up some key points in the coming journey.
I am Daniel.
Daniel mentioned he must stop him, and that a shadow is chasing him. Even the fact that his memory seems to be badly affected by something plays into just how the story's told. Daniel wakes up in a stone hallway with rain from the storm outside leaking in through a crack in the ceiling. He's surrounded by flower petals and notices some liquid on the floor that looks like red wine. Deciding to follow it, his vision begins to go hazy and his steps falter as an ominous roar echoes from somewhere deep within the castle. Along the way, a door will blow open from wind, seemingly just to set him on edge. He struggles to open the cabinet because the person behind his actions is very slow and slightly dumb. It's me. He'll begin to hear random sounds of creaking, house groans, and footsteps. This could be auditory hallucinations, or it could be something messing with him. Whatever it is seems to affect him more than just a little. But eventually the liquid trail leads Daniel to the old archives. As soon as Daniel takes a few steps into the old archives, that wind from before blows all the torches out. Seems something wants to impede his progress. More wind tries to scare Daniel, but even that can't dampen Daniel's distaste for the literature here. At least there's a lantern to find. Okay, Daniel, that's enough. Finally moving on, Daniel finds a note to himself.
I wish I could ask how much you remember. I don't know if there'll be anything left after I consume this drink.
He writes to himself as if he's another person, and perhaps he is in a sense, at least for now. And we have a goal. Make it to the inner sanctum and conduct righteous retribution upon Alexander Brennenberg. All the while staying out of reach of this mysterious shadow following Daniel.
God willing, the name Alexander of Brennenberg still invokes bitter anger in you.
With that goal in mind, Daniel finds a lever on the wall that reveals a secret passage behind a bookshelf, which leads to the entrance hall. In here, Daniel is struck with a memory. Daniel and Alexander speak, so it seems their relationship wasn't always so hostile. This has us wondering just what the two were up to, and how things turned sour.
What did you call it?
The inner sanctum.
We also learned the inner sanctum is below the castle, so it's gonna be a trek to get there.
It lies beneath the very stone of Brennenberg.
In this entrance hall, there are a few different rooms Daniel will have to navigate in order to move closer to his goal. However, some, like the wine cellar, are locked and require a key. And the entrance is blocked by this fleshy mass. A flesh gate, if you will. For now, he heads towards the laboratory. The castle is in ill repair, perhaps from whatever beast bellows within its depths, or perhaps from neglect. As Daniel searches the area, he can hear footsteps on the landing above him, and hisses from roaches at his feet. Choosing to proceed into the next room, he hears a voice speaking about the taste of Damascus rose.
That phrase. Damascus rose.
We will often hear these echoes of the past as we continue this journey, whether it be something from Daniel's memory, his mind playing tricks on him, or the shadows warping of reality. I can't say. But they are tidbits of the dark things that happened in this stony castle. In this laboratory, we'll find notes and memories that speak on ingredients for acidic agents. Aqua Fortis and Aqua Regia are mentioned. These are Latin names for nitric acid and a mixture of nitric acid and hydrochloric acid respectively.
And one part Aqua Fortis.
Alexander used these agents to test on organic flesh in order to produce artificial vitae, which could be translated to artificial life. We don't yet know exactly what that is, why he needs it, or what organic flesh he's testing on, but it alludes to something dark. These are ingredients Daniel will need in order to proceed past the flesh gate, so that will be his goal in this hub area. Daniel will also find something I'll call a memory thingy. I'm kidding. I'm gonna call it a memory doohickey. It doesn't make much sense right now, nor do we know whose words these are, but whoever they are seem to justify whatever atrocities they commit by the longing of wanting to be with a loved one. Methinks the lady doth protest too much. Anyway, according to Alexander's notes, the ingredients can be found in the wine cellar. But as previously established, Daniel's gonna need a key to get in there, so he heads to the archives. He'll find another note he'd written before his memory loss in here, which goes,
16th of May, 1839. The unflinching African sun has continued to plague our expedition.
So he was in Algeria, which, if you didn't know, is in North Africa and is mostly desert. The location fits with the mention of the legend of Tin Hinan, or Teen Hinan, by Professor Herbert.
He told me about the legend of Tin Hinan, the mother of us all.
She wasn't just a legend, though. In 1925, explorers discovered her tomb, proving she was a historical figure. Was this the tomb they were looking for and found? Or did they stumble upon some other tomb? Either way, Daniel is sure Professor Herbert isn't telling him the whole story.
No matter what the professor is keeping from me, the dig should yield something interesting to take back to London and the British Museum.
Now roaches again? Why won't you die? As Daniel continues to explore, he finds the second Algeria note in the study.
The crudely carved passage confused me.
He's inside the tomb now, and mentions that it looks much older than what they were expecting. Something about it strikes a chord of familiarity with him, though he's somewhat unsettled by the idea.
Despite their unearthly quality, I felt a strange familiarity toward them, which haunts me still.
However, out of sheer curiosity, he continues forward, and ends up separated from the team and trapped.
Head. I gave the order to raise it, and as I pushed through the narrow space, the heavy stone suddenly dropped, sealing me inside. I was trapped.
That sucks, Dan. You'll notice this place continues to mess with our protagonist. Books dropping and the piano playing in the other room all meant to mess with his psychological fortitude, and it won't be stopping anytime soon. Exploring more of this room reveals that Alexander knows of the shadow too, and seems to know of what it's capable of.
It hasn't been tended to for centuries. When the shadow arrives, it won't take long until things start falling apart.
We're just buying time anyway. Let's do what we can.
Again, it seems like he and Daniel are working towards a common goal that lies in the inner sanctum.
Let's get the servants working on it.
Entering the room right across from the room with the schematics causes a cave-in from the hallway Daniel took to get here. He's trapped and must find a way out. He can't stay here forever. Before getting to that though, he attempts to read another note, but something about it causes him to faint momentarily.
"17th of May, 1839. After pounding the unforgiving stone wall for what seemed like an eternity, I realized it was hopeless. I was trapped. I fell to the ground, gasping for air, trying to focus. That's when I saw a faint blue shimmer. My weakened body was heavy to carry, but I managed to push myself toward the enchanting light. It was waiting for me. Enclosed in dark nothingness, I felt myself drawn to the mystic light. I reached out, closing it in my hands. The faint glow escaped my fingers and began to spark brightly and spirit me away. unlocking alien memories of spiraling towers, endless deserts, and impossible geometry. The next thing I can remember is the grating sound of stone being lifted, the voices of the Arabs pulling me to safety, and grasped firmly in my hands was the broken pieces of a most peculiar relic.
It seems he's just relived that past moment, trapped in the tomb. We can't figure out what this orb is just yet, but it is something significant for sure. Now, Daniel needs to get out of here. Using a chair and his superior throwing skills, he knocks a hole in the wall and manages to slip through. Daniel has a bit of a puzzle on his hands here, but thanks to the memory, he figures out pretty easily what to do. Pulling 3 particular books in quick succession will reveal another hidden doorway. Before he leaves, Daniel can find an interesting tale about the gatherers here. It's said that deep in the Prussian woods in the hamlet of Oststadt and its neighbor Castle Brennenburg are haunted by the dark. That soldiers that abandoned their duties and got lost in the woods were forever damned to roam the area. And their tainted souls disfigured their bodies, turning them into some sort of revenant that would steal living creatures away in burlap sacks. There's a really interesting part that mentions Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa. His name will be mentioned more than once as we continue with this story, but for now, it's written that he visited Oststadt at the start of the 16th century, and after going out to investigate the northwestern glades, he was never seen again. However, Heinrich is known to have passed away in Grenoble 10 years later, and dismissed the notion of ever having visited Oststadt. As the note ponders, who was the man that visited the hamlet all those years ago, and what happened to him? The next tale mentions Alexander and names him the Baron of Brennenburg. He lived a reclusive life with his family there. The castle itself has little history before it was burned in the late 16th century and was rebuilt by Alexander, who is said to be a nobleman from the Rhinelands and claimed the role as protector of the Prussian state. It seemed he was well liked, for he helped the region flourish in his time. However, due to he and his family's secretive nature, there's been no recorded birth or death date. As how these things go, there are rumors and theories abound about this man, none that have proven to be true or false as of yet. Daniel moves on from that interesting lore and manages to find the wine cellar key in the next room. Picking it up causes something to happen. But Daniel has another note to read first. It can be found in a drawer and can give a little more information on the wine cellar's use. Apparently, Alexander had men handling human vessels, whatever that means, but the job they were doing was attracting attention as the local sheriff began keeping a close eye on the forest. In response, he locks them in the wine cellar until either the king's men leave or they starve, and mentions that feeding them some wine would solve both his problems. This leaves us with even more questions, but if there's one thing we can say for sure, Alexander is a cold and callous man. The sound from earlier was the door unsealing, which Daniel can now walk freely through. However, just down the hallway he spots the figure of a brute leaving from the other exit. It understandably stresses him out, but there's no other way out, and he must head in the same direction. He can hear the brute making odd sounds while quickly and carefully heading towards the exit. Things don't look to be much better out here. Fleshy growths appear on the castle walls and floor, blocking off previous paths and even causing damage when gotten too close. But Daniel still needs those ingredients, and now that he has the key, he can check out the wine cellar. When he does, we can hear a short memory play from the men who were locked down here.
Where did the Baron go?
Who cares? He left us enough wine to last us a lifetime. Or at least until tomorrow.
They're all fine now, happy to drink all the wine. But we know from earlier information that that was perhaps not a good idea. As Daniel searches the area for the ingredients he needs, a brute appears around the corner. His sanity begins to decline, and not even the lantern does anything to assuage the panic. Turns out, staring at the figure itself causes his distress. It will stay there until Daniel walks towards it, which it then will walk around the corner and disappear, finally providing some relief for Daniel. That's not the end of the odd things happening down here though. As Daniel approaches this door, something will bang on it harshly. and when looking inside, Daniel comes upon a disturbing scene.
What's happening? Oh, it feels like my chest is going to burst.
The wine they feasted on before has now shown its nefarious properties and done something to them. At least Daniel finally finds the Aqua Regia down here, and Wilhelm's last words. The note says that Wilhelm was summoned to Brennenburg Castle by Alexander, not because of his accolades as a soldier, but because of the follies of his past. Alexander wanted him to kidnap healthy humans and to do so without question. In return, he would put in a good word with the royal court, advancing Wilhelm's position within noble society. Men, women, children all were up for grabs, and Wilhelm grabbed many. He writes that after he and his men drank the wine, their bones pierced their skin in a tangled mess, and his insides revolted against their God-given nature. It seems to allude to these men perhaps turning into the disfigured brutes we've seen glimpses of. This is what Alexander was referring to when he said drinking the wine would solve both his problems. This also seems linked to the folklore of the region of the revenants stealing living beings away. Daniel has one more ingredient to find in here before he can leave. Once he does find the calamine, the castle rumbles harshly and causes a barrel to fall from above to strike him, temporarily knocking him out. When Daniel wakes, he finds the door is now blocked by some stones and beams. Luckily, he's strong enough to move these out of the way. Oh, almost forgot the Cooperite. Don't forget the Cooperite. It's time for Daniel to make the mixture, which means he needs to head to the laboratory again. While working on the mixture, another loud crash happens with the sound of a deep roar. From his vantage point, he can't tell what just broke, but he needs to finish the mixture first. Now with that pot of acid, Daniel can finally move deeper into the castle. But there's a bit of a problem though. The stairs have been destroyed, so he's gonna have to figure out another way to get up there. Jumping doesn't seem to work, nor does staring at it. It's only after an embarrassingly long time does Daniel figure out that the pallets can be of use. The area is now covered with a fleshy substance, so it's time to get the heck out of here. Using the pot of acid on the tissue seems to work well, and he can now enter the refinery. This area begins with another memory of Daniel and Alexander.
It sure is dark in here.
Multiple times Daniel asks Alexander about the lack of light, and Alexander continues to dodge the question.
Stay close. Be careful not to stray.
His words are cause for concern. He doesn't want Daniel to stray, which means this area holds some potential dangers. Ah, well there you go. And it's about now Daniel runs out of oil for his lamp. Perfect timing. The hits keep coming for Daniel, for when he tries to examine another note from himself, the door on the far side of the wall does its thing. His health isn't superb and his psychological state is even worse, but Daniel will press on. He must.
22nd of June, 1839.
It seems Daniel was affected more than a little from his experience trapped in the tomb, so much so that Professor Herbert sent him home so he wouldn't disrupt the dig.
I returned to England. He said he didn't want to risk forfeiting the entire expedition lest I took a turn for the worse.
He says it's been some time since he last wrote, and it's only now because he happened upon this journal and the things he brought back from Africa, along with the shattered orb.
Africa. Next to it lay the broken stone orb wrapped in cloth.
I can understand forgetting the journal, but how'd he just forget about the orb? Shattered or not, it sounded like quite the interaction he had with it. You don't just forget about something like that. So, at this point in the game, I went down into this trapdoor thing, not knowing it would lead to the next area, so I kind of skipped whatever else was here. Good news is, the only thing I missed was the second part of Daniel's return entries, and it merely talks about how he kept trying to piece the orb back together, but he had difficulty because the pieces kept behaving oddly, like changing colors, shape, and texture. And that's about it. So back to the game. As Daniel enters the archives, the situation quickly turns dangerous. Hiding isn't gonna work here, as Daniel finds out firsthand. Huh. That's a legitimately helpful hint. This time, Daniel hops onto the safety of the crate, Whatever's in the water can't harm him as long as he's not in it. As for what's in the water, no idea. Whatever it is invisible to Daniel, with only splashes to make itself known. Daniel's gonna have to hop his way around this flooded area in order to stay clear of danger. Unfortunately, that won't always be an option, as he'll find out whenever he comes across a door that only opens by turning a wheel, while trapped in a room with one of those things. There were perhaps other ways to go about it, but he proceeds to throw, human meat into the water to distract the creature and quickly opens the door. The nightmare isn't over yet, for within the archive tunnels, Daniel will have to run for his life, as one of those creatures chases him, hot on his heels. His only hope for staying ahead of it is the door and debris between them. Daniel is successful with evading the whatever it was, and finds himself now in the Black Hall. This section of the castle is a balm to the nerves with its more serene music and... well, never mind. There's an elevator in this area that'll take Daniel down into the deep depths of the castle, closer to the inner sanctum. But it isn't working, which means he's gonna have to do some repairs before taking that long ride. In the storage area, Daniel makes a note on how strange and unnatural the darkness here is. He'll need to tread carefully. Like I said, carefully. An interesting find down here is a note to Alexander from Agrippa. Do you remember that name? Could this be that Agrippa? Probably. The note mentions explosives, so that's definitely going to be something Daniel will need. That's the rule of thumb here. If a note says it, Daniel will probably need it. The hand drill is an item which can be used to collect the explosive liquid Agrippa mentioned. On a side note, I spent so long boxing myself in, just sure a brute would spawn after picking up this handle. For nothing to happen. Bullshit. With explosives in hand, Daniel can use it to clear out a rubble blockage. When heading towards it, he'll experience the memory of a female prisoner.
I just want to go home.
It's unsettling, but there's nothing for it at the moment. After placing the explosives, Daniel needs to throw a rock at it to set it off. Dang it. Ah! Come on. Seriously? Finally! Down here we can find something special. It's red. Just kidding. I guess I deserve that. Did he close the door? As Daniel proceeds, we'll hear more on the female prisoner. Well, there goes the levity. She's another victim of this castle-turned-prison. Daniel will find 2 of the 3 rods he needs to make repairs to the elevator. However, when he picks them up, another brute will spawn. Once the danger is past, he can make his way back to the Black Hall, but not before happening upon yet another brute. Free from the foreboding dark, Daniel presses on to the guest rooms. Here, more of his letters can be found. They describe more of what happened during the expedition after his departure.
I received a letter today from the Algerian governor's office disclosing the fate of Herbert's expedition.
Professor Herbert has seemingly disappeared, and it's unknown what happened to him or the rest of the team, save one who was badly injured.
As if maimed by a lion.
And so Daniel collected what was left of the expedition's items and found Herbert's journal. What he writes confuses him, as Herbert says he went into the tomb and retrieved the orb. But if that was true, how does Daniel have it now?
If he has the orb, what are those pieces in my drawing room?
I haven't yet mentioned them, but short snippets of story text will be shown while loading into a new area. One of those said, Herbert's trunk was wrapped in a rope. The lock had been broken, by thieves he assumed. He wondered if anything had been left considering all the hands it had passed. Could this mean Daniel was the thief? After his time in the tomb, his memory was skewed for a while. He thought he had spent only minutes in there, when in actuality it had been closer to an hour.
Recovered Daniel after 1 hour of entrapment.
He was affected badly enough for Herbert to send him home. Is it possible that directly after his rescue, he, not in his right mind, stole the orb from Herbert and just doesn't remember? Or did the orb find its way to him? Using the crowbar found here, Daniel can pry open the door and find a key to the machine room behind a portrait. And the last of the notes in this group will be found in the same room.
It's done.
Daniel has managed to piece the orb together after a night of nightmares and a sudden spike of knowledge.
But somehow, I knew how it was supposed to be.
A brute will spawn when trying to leave, giving me and Daniel one hell of an anxiety spike as he tries to hide in the nearby wardrobe. Oh my god, just close! This isn't the last of the interesting discoveries to be made in the Black Hall hub. When exploring the study, Daniel can find another letter from Agrippa, this time addressed to his most trusted student and friend, Johann Weyer. Reminiscent of the tale mentioned in the folklore page, Agrippa was visiting Oststadt and he did venture into the woodland. He writes that he found one of the orbs in a cavern off one of the trails. It's the most important discovery of his life, as he's been hunting them for the last 20 years. However, when he took the orb, the beast, some sort of guardian as he calls it, began chasing him. In the end, the orb had somehow transported him across the Alps to a grassy field outside Genoa, and the guardian had taken the orb from him. This explains what happened in that tale. Heinrich Agrippa did disappear from the Prussian woods that day, and when asked about it years later, denied ever having been in the area, because he still held that fear and maybe some trauma from that guardian chase. The rest of the information found in this area is much more disturbing. Alexander experimented on dogs and humans alike. He induces fear and pain in order to harvest energy that reeks of cosmic genesis. Nothing like a little property destruction to make one feel better, eh, Daniel? Outside on this ledge, we can see that the visceral tissue isn't confined to inside of the castle. It extends beyond the outer walls, making the castle look like it's stuck in some very disgusting looking gum. There was a reason to come this way, as Daniel can find two important items within this room, a memory doohickey and the third rod. This passage will be explained further on, but it's become apparent that this Agrippa is an important character to this dismal story. We've got one more room left before we can take that ride, the machine room. Daniel will have a couple things to fix in here, ranging from moving levers, getting smacked in the face by a door, placing cogs, and inserting rods, which will enable the use of the elevator. Aside from that, more information on this orb and Daniel's past come to light. Daniel contacts a Professor Taylor, who helped Daniel discover that the orb may have influenced the Globus Cruciger, otherwise known as the Orb and Cross,
which so many royal regalia holds to this day. In ancient times, the orbs were held by priests as a symbol of the sun and its power.
He also mentions the passing of Sir William Smith, a geologist he'd asked for his expertise.
I know it's silly, but I can't help feeling responsible somehow.
We also find out just how Daniel and Alexander came into acquaintance. Among the people he sent correspondence to from Herbert's address book, Alexander was one of the many to respond, and the most intriguing.
I know. I can protect you. Come to Brennenburg Castle.
The last of the notes inform of a grim fate of all those Daniel came into contact with. And now, convinced something followed him from the expedition in Africa, he turns to the odd and enigmatic Alexander.
Is it following me? How can it not be?
Like in the first hub area, this one is violently overtaken by the Red Viscera, and that means it's time to go. Regardless of the repairs, the ride is not a smooth one, not with the shadow on Daniel's trail. After gathering himself from that rough fall, Daniel is immediately pulled into another memory featuring Alexander.
Come, this way. What was that? Forgive me, I should have warned you. One of my responsibilities as a baron is that of a prison warden. This is where criminals are locked up.
Like a dungeon?
Very much so. Come, don't linger.
Is anyone surprised he has a prison? He would need somewhere to keep his pest subjects. Not far in, we can hear a brute attacking someone, setting the tone for this unsettling location. It also caused a major hit to Daniel's psychological state. His vision is slightly blurred and bugs can be seen crawling on the screen. He manages to pull himself together quick enough, which is much needed because Daniel is going to have to survive the terrors of this prison. It feels like there's an enemy around every corner down here. Luckily, there's only one goal here: get out. While braving the darkness, Daniel can find a hammer and chisel to aid in his escape of this prison. While picking up the chisel, we get a rather important memory.
I'll never tell you.
You're just making things worse.
It reveals that Daniel isn't as innocent in these matters as we had assumed him to be, as perhaps he had assumed of himself, sans memory. Dropping in the newly formed hole, Daniel will now find himself in a tunnel dug out by a previous prisoner. Taking the tunnel to the right leads to a break in the wall. He's now out of that cell block, but not out of danger. While it felt like there was a brute around every corner in the previous room, it's a little more true for this place. It is one of the most enemy-riddled areas in the game, so Daniel will need to be alert and quick on his feet. In one of the cell rooms, a memory of a prisoner will play in Daniel's ears. He doesn't know what he did to deserve his punishment, and mentions a man running into a burning house.
Why did he have to go in there? Don't go into burning houses. He should have known better.
It doesn't seem important in the moment, but it will become more clear later on. More of Daniel's notes can be found here too. They describe his arrival in Oststadt, then Brennenburg Castle, and the momentary relief it brought him to be here.
My room is exquisite, and I'm confident that no hotel for miles could even hope to match it.
He also writes how Alexander told him more about the orb, that by just touching it invokes the powers within, and if you're too weak to control it, it will devour you, and simply getting rid of it wouldn't save Daniel.
I asked Alexander what he meant when he said he could protect me, and he answered that things can be done, but at a price.
Uh-oh. While in the kitchen, Daniel can find a small vat of acid, as you do. Something he will surely need in the near future. Like on the very next door he needs to get through. Using the acid and hammer, Daniel manages to break through the lock and quickly runs into the cistern. As yet another brute spawns behind him. Welcome to the cistern. The ladder to the upper area is stuck, but with some oil and a little percussive maintenance, it slides down easily. With his physical and mental health at its peak condition, Daniel is ready to face whatever this place has to throw at him. Now, he enters the control room. Daniel will have to employ his maintenance skills again in order to get that bridge on the right to lower. With that done, Daniel can return to the cistern. As I was saying, he can now return to the cistern. In another part of the cistern, Daniel will have to hop his way across the crumbling walkways to redirect the water from the sewers in order to navigate them. There isn't any of those invisible creatures in the water here, but I don't trust it. Before Daniel can turn the valve, he finds another of his journal pages. This is mostly Daniel waxing on about how great and smart Alexander is. I'm sure he won't eat those words later.
It turns out that Alexander is a true Renaissance man, paralleled only by Da Vinci, I'm sure.
A strong wind will blow the torches out after turning the wheel. Something that was a little startling in the beginning is now old hat that barely affects Daniel, other than the suddenness of it, which too will soon fade. As Daniel passes by this wall, he can hear someone in there, drowning. Oops, sorry guy, but Daniel stops for no one. The second note Daniel comes across will note how Alexander knew how to manipulate the orb with his strange tools of science. However, a familiar pulsating tissue began to form, cutting the session short.
The blue light was stained by strains of red, and the walls burst with pulsating tissue resonating with the scene.
This shadow is closer than Alexander had expected and determines they will have to do a warding ritual, something Daniel is very wary about.
But I have a bad feeling about this.
The sewers are now drained, but Daniel still won't be able to traverse them just yet. There's something he needs in the morgue. Since the bridge is jammed, Daniel can heft a stone at it to unstick it and proceed inside. In here, there are many bodies, as you would expect of such a place, but most are piled up like garbage, which tells us exactly what Alexander thinks about his test subjects. There are a couple notes in here that will explain how a plague outbreak began affecting the prisoners, and the source of it came from the mushrooms in the sewers, which is what was used to transport his victims into the castle. He couldn't have them keeling over before he got what he needed, so he created a vaccine. Still, he does note that the blood of one previously vaccinated would do the job. And conveniently, we have a volunteer right here in this room. Daniel will need to find a copper pipe in order to make a syringe, but the guy's head's a bit too thick. Well, Daniel still has that hand drill. Once that's done, Daniel will transfuse some of the blood into himself. He's lucky that didn't have a worse effect on him. There is so much wrong with what he just did. Game logic, I guess. There's also a memory capsule here, which goes on about how, in Alexander's words, Daniel is tainted by the approaching shadow. He will not be able to pass the gate. And when addressing his love, he says he sees evil in Daniel, and that it's cruel irony that he has to do to Daniel what Agrippa did to him. Alexander isn't a trustworthy person? Gasp. Say it ain't so. Well, anyway, now he can traverse the sewers. There's a fan in here that you'll need to pass by. Daniel will stick his hand in it to see if he can stop it. I sometimes wonder if the amnesia tonic he drank made him forget sense, or if he ever had any to begin with. If Daniel heads toward the right, he can break off a piece of pipe. But the fan is moving far too fast to stop it, so heading to the left, he can move a couple levers that will slow it down. Now when he places the pipe, the fan will be jammed and he can crouch his way past. He's almost out of these dank sewers, but there's a gate blocking the way. So going in the only direction possible, Daniel will find a room that's already covered in red tissue, and a brute lies torn in two. When trying to head back out, we'll hear a loud sound of a crash. A brute has damaged the gate that was previously blocking Daniel's way. But before Daniel can run through it, he's gonna have to hide till the brute leaves. That's not gonna be his last run-in with these guys. To be able to leave the sewers, he'll need to get past one guarding the exit. Being a sneaky snake, Daniel can head around the right and distract it by throwing a stone, then sneak around the other side and quickly run past. The brute will chase you, but it's a short run to the ladder that'll get him out of here. Which will bring Daniel to the Nave, the last hub area of the game. Right away, Daniel can find a note that sheds a little more light into his character. Past, Daniel learns what the ritual entails, sacrificing another person's life for his own. Alexander likely tells Daniel the man is a murderer in order to assuage him. Though I believe the man isn't the horrible person Alexander's making him out to be.
Alexander made all the arrangements, but he said I had to perform the ritual in order to have the right effect.
At this point, Daniel still believes in Alexander and follows his instruction.
What else could I do? Alexander said it had to be done.
Daniel can mess with some levers, but they aren't working. At this point, I think Daniel missed his calling.
No.
Taking the winding staircase down, Daniel will finally come face to face with Agrippa.
Help me.
Ugh. He'll ask Daniel to pull a lever on this contraption, which allows him to speak with much more ease.
Thank you. You have my gratitude.
After Daniel informs him that Alexander does indeed have an orb, Agrippa sends Daniel off to find the broken pieces of his orb that Alexander had previously broken. It's the only way to breach the inner sanctum now.
Really? Then if you tell the truth, by all means, seek out the pieces of the broken orb and mend away.
If Daniel waits around a little longer, Agrippa will ask him a favor. He wants Daniel to take him with him when he faces Alexander.
Would you consider taking me with you?
He explains that he doesn't mean Daniel needs to haul his weakened body around, but instead says a man named Johann Weyer was working on a potion to free him from his withered husk.
A tonic to free me from this husk of mine.
Heeding his request will give you the option of one of 3 endings, and it's not like Daniel really needs to go out of his way to do this for him. While Daniel moves about trying to reach some machinery in the ceiling above him, Agrippa will continue to talk. He gives quite a bit of backstory that could easily be missed if Daniel was just rushing through. He says that Alexander really wanted Johann Weyer, but had to settle for him. As to why, because Weyer was actually Agrippa's student, and thought perhaps Weyer would come back for him.
I've always hoped Weyer would return and give me a second chance. But so does Alexander. That's why he keeps me here, as a hostage, hoping Vaya will reveal himself.
Johann knew how to unshackle the hordes of the orbs, and was adept at using them to travel far and wide, even beyond the world itself. Far beyond Alexander's skills, which is why Alexander would want him. As interesting as all that is, Daniel needs to get back to business, and now that he's fixed the problem with the gears, he can head back up and flip those switches. Alexander knows what you're trying to do and telepathically sends a warning.
I have to stop you. I can't let you proceed any further.
Doesn't matter. Daniel really has no choice but to keep moving forward. An interesting note can be found on a desk. Alexander laments Agrippa's lack of compassion from his seat of power, even though Wire claims he's trying to release him from his banishment, but he doesn't truly trust that, not when he's seen his trickery before. Still, he doesn't have much of a choice in the moment and writes down the ingredients for the tonic to free Agrippa, and where to get them. Thanks, Alex. That was real helpful. Another memory doohickey can be found in here too, which basically tells us Alexander has been around for a long time. A long, long time. So now we have to be thinking Alexander isn't from this realm. Whether he's from another world, another dimension, or another time, we know that he desperately wants to return to it. We just read that he was banished. I'm not sure if that means he was literally banished from his home, or if something happened that sent him here and he's using colorful language to describe it. Either way, he's no human. Agrippa will explain further that Alexander is trying to open a gate to another world, and wishes for Daniel to temper his want for revenge momentarily and send him through the gate.
Let me pass the gate then.
It seems Daniel has a lot on his plate, so he better get to it. He'll be heading into the chancel first. Before he can even touch the door to the inner part of the area, a brute can be heard on the other side. It's guarding the bridge, so as usual, Daniel will need to hide and wait until the coast is clear. Heading towards the left, Daniel will find a note of his previous self. Daniel's on a bit of a high horse in this one. He's willfully blinded himself and believes only what Alexander has told him.
Being around these degenerates makes me ill. None of them even tries to face their punishment with any kind of dignity.
With a heaping dose of irony and hypocrisy, he wonders what would cause someone to fall so far from civilized society.
They are all wicked men, and I remind myself of it constantly.
While talking about torturing people.
I try to study the different tools in the torture chamber and learn how to use them effectively.
What the f, Daniel? Doing an about face and running to the right side, Daniel can find some information on just how Alexander broke the orb. Apparently after the incident with Wilhelm, his patience was thin, and proceeded with the ritual without proper foresight, causing the orb to crack. And unlike Daniel, he doesn't know how to piece it together. It's interesting that Alexander has been shown up time and time again by others. It makes him look like he's just fumbling about, messing with things he maybe should understand, but doesn't. Now heading toward the center room, Daniel will see a tunnel of electricity, and like a dumbass, touches it, then calls it a mystic tunnel. I get that this was the days before electricity was really a used thing, and Daniel seems to be more of a historical man than a scientist, but common sense would tell you not to stick your hand in the mystic light, especially if you don't know what it is. You're not a child, Daniel. Use your brain. As Daniel tries to leave, Alexander will pipe up again.
If so, blame yourself. You started this.
I want to be honest, I don't like either one of them right now. The memory doesn't endear them any further to me either. It seems Alexander has figured out how to amp up the fear without killing the subject, by torturing people and piping the sound to the other prisoners.
Sounds from the torture chambers are shuttled in through those pipes in the ceiling. Manage your victims well, and let one prisoner's pain instill terror in his cellmate.
Now, on to the choir. I want to point out this little text that pops up while we're loading into a new area. Some of Daniel's actions can be excused because he's been under duress, and that can affect your decision making, making you do things you wouldn't otherwise do. But it's things like this that show Daniel is no innocent fool. I mean, he's a fool, but he ain't innocent. He has a darkness to him. It may be the orb's doing, that perhaps something changed in him, or it could be that it was there all along. Along this candle-lined hallway, Daniel can find the altars where the ritual would be performed. On one of these altars, a note can be found, but unlike the rest, it has Daniel relieve his actions.
Take the man, cut the lines, cut the flesh, watch the blood spill, let it come. Please, I didn't do anything. Paint the man, cut the lines, paint the man, cut the lines. Please, the man cries. Now you see.
Daniel has really gone off the deep end here. Like, seriously. This isn't all there is to the choir though, as we'll find out once Daniel enters the main area. There's some kind of fog in here that obscures the view, which could make this area a real pain to navigate, especially with the amount of potential brute spawns. However, a lot of hassle can be negated by just following along the wall. There are 3 rooms Daniel will need to investigate, and they can all easily be reached by doing this. He will have to hide time to time and cross some bridges, but all in all, it's not as difficult an area as it first seems. 3 orb pieces will be found next to 3 instruments of torture, including the wheel, the bronze bull, and an iron maiden. Daniel can also find an ingredient for Agrippa's tonic here too. When all these items are gotten, Daniel can make his way to the transept now, but before entering, he can step into the side area. Here, he can fashion a piece of meat to the line and acquire the second ingredient for Agrippa's tonic. Just like in the choir, Daniel will find 3 more orb pieces next to 3 more torture devices. There's one memory here that will explain things a little further. Remember the memory from the prisons? The man talked about his friend running into a burning building? I believe this is the same man. Alexander has twisted the story to make a fairly innocent man look like a murderer.
Don't pay his lies any attention.
And Daniel has no questions, believes every word he says without a doubt in his mind, and even has the gall to ask if the man is alright. No, Daniel, he's not alright.
Of course. We are dealing with monsters here.
I'm sure Alexander has masterfully manipulated Daniel, but Daniel isn't blameless here. He's got some major blinders on. The worst torture device is in the last room, and that's the saw rat. To clue you into just how bad this was, well, your ankles would be tied to this, hanging you upside down, while a saw would be used to split you in half, starting from, the groin area. Ugh. Daniel can find the last ingredient for Agrippa's potion in here too. Up the spiral staircase, one more memory doohickey can be found. Alexander speaks on how he knows what he's become, and he can't really redeem himself. The Black Eagle fears him, and after Napoleon's defeat, they will want his head on a platter. His time here is running out. Heading back to the chancel, Daniel will be attacked by several brutes and carted off to the prison. When he awakes, Daniel will find himself locked in a cell. Alexander will speak to him, confirming that Daniel did indeed drink the amnesia potion, and offers for him to just stay there and let the shadow take him. And you can do that. After a while of waiting in the cell, the shadow will consume you. But to hell with that. Instead, Daniel quickly works to free himself of his captivity. The door out of here is locked, but with a little ingenuity, Daniel can flush the key from its hiding place and use it on the door. Now, run. The shadow will chase Daniel through this area. Just like the previous 2 times, it's another gauntlet. No need to waste time closing doors here. Daniel just needs to run as fast as he can to make it back to the Nave. Once back in the Nave, he can now pick up a special letter.
18th of August, 1839. Tonight, we will unlock the power of the orb and ultimately banish the shadow hunting me. I feel it closing in on me, and I fear for my life more than ever. Just outside Altstadt lies a small settlement where Zimmerman, a dairy farmer, lives with his wife and 3 children. We took the coach and went there. Our visit was unexpected, and Alexander was able to strike Zimmerman down without alerting the others. As he went to take care of the farmhands, I began to look for the children. We should have more than enough prisoners to finish the ritual now.
I think Daniel's broken. How do you really come back from something like that? The shadow is close now, having infected the last bastion of the castle other than the inner sanctum. Daniel needs to brew that tonic for Agrippa post-haste.
First, feed me the tonic, and then use the saw to remove my head.
Excuse me?
Quickly, off with the head.
Well, dang, if you insist. Back in the transept, Daniel will be able to piece the orb back together with the tar. But as always, it's never that easy. He's gonna need to destroy some machinery for once. One of the last of Daniel's notes can be found before leaving. He finally realizes that his actions have been vile. What he still doesn't realize is that not all those other people were guilty.
Sure, I would kill a murderer to save an innocent. But to kill an innocent to save myself? A cold-blooded murderer.
Now, Daniel can finally enter the inner sanctum. After quickly closing the gate to keep the shadow at bay, there are 2 rooms Daniel must enter. In one, he can find the last of his journal pages. This doesn't make you look any better, Daniel. You care more for revenge than repentance in this moment.
He expects me to meet my death as he steals power beyond imagination?
But at least we now know why he drank the amnesia potion. He needed to forget his fear and all the things that had his mind messed up in order to achieve his goal. His revenge.
I'm as broken as the men I've tortured. If only I could wipe my fear away, as we did with them.
Anyway, Daniel will now need to cut his hand on whatever this is, and stand on the symbol on the floor, and repeat the action in the other room. Upon doing so, we'll open the way, but the shadow is advancing and will bring Daniel to his knees. Gathering himself, he quickly makes his way to the orb room. Finally, Daniel meets Alexander face to face, and now he has a choice to make. Does he take his revenge? Does he heed Agrippa's wishes? Or does he just give up and let Alexander complete his ritual? While deciding, Alexander will continue on with his non-understanding of how good and evil work, and asked how Agrippa was any different.
Are you so blind that you see no good in me or evil in Agrippa?
The thing is, no one in this room is good. I'm sure Agrippa had a hand in Alexander's dastardly dealings, even if he was just a passive bystander. He still let it happen, just as Daniel did, although more directly. None of them really deserve a good ending if I'm to be honest, but Alexander was the start of all this. Without him, I doubt Daniel at least would have ever descended into such depths of depravity. So it's not necessarily about good and evil, but it's about doing what you think you should, and that all depends on what you think Daniel deserves. If you choose to help Agrippa, you throw his head into the portal, saving him and dooming both yourself and Alexander. Although, that's not necessarily the end of Daniel.
Do you see him, Vaya? He deserves so much more. Please, help him. I know you can.
If you choose revenge, well, the name says it all. After destroying the pillars, Alexander is no more, and Daniel can freely walk out of the castle, alive, and no longer hunted by the shadow.
You think I was afraid, fleeing Brennenburg? Huh. Quite the contrary.
And if you choose to just give up, you're giving Alexander exactly what he wanted. He travels through the portal, while Daniel remains to be consumed. Of the 3 endings, there is no standard good ending. That is up to your interpretation of events and what you think Daniel deserves. We've seen Daniel sink into depravity over the course of the game. He was under some dire circumstances, for his life was on the line, but you have to ask, how far is too far? I don't think Daniel was a bad guy from the start. He may have not been a shining beacon of good, but as far as we know, he hadn't harmed or wanted to harm anyone aside from a childhood bully. It wasn't until he met Alexander that he began his dark descent. I'm not sorry for that pun, by the way. And we could attribute his blind faith in Alexander to the fact that he's the only one he knew of that could possibly save his life. He believed in Alexander because he felt he had no other choice. It was that, or accept defeat. We as living creatures have an innate will to survive, so I can't fault Daniel for not wanting to accept that fate. But how far should we draw the line at doing anything to survive? It's easy for me to say from my outside view that Daniel was evil, and it's true that he did do evil things. But I don't know if that makes him inherently so. He was in dire circumstances and was clearly manipulated by someone out for their own gain. I should also mention that I believe he may have been addicted to laudanum, a medicine which was basically opium and alcohol, so that also could have attributed to his state of mind. After taking the life of the first man, something in him broke, and that's when we really see a change in him. He becomes more hypocritical, more judgmental, and more manic. And it wasn't until he harmed someone he couldn't fool himself into thinking wasn't purely innocent did he see what he had truly become. This sounds like I'm making excuses for him, and trust me, I'm not. Daniel committed heinous acts that can't simply be forgiven just because of his circumstances. He would need to do some heavy atonement to reach any level of that, and he simply didn't. Sure, he felt regret for what he did for a fleeting moment, but that quickly turned into rage. He wanted vengeance against Alexander more than anything. That was his whole goal with drinking the Amnesia tonic, to be able to forget it all in order to be mentally strong enough to enact said vengeance upon Alexander. This is why the vengeance ending rubs me the wrong way. Daniel goes on about how the castle served as his purgatory to burn away his sins, and he paid his price by ending Alexander. I disagree. While his journey through the castle was no picnic in the park, I don't know if hiding from some brutes and witnessing some memories is enough to count as atonement. And as far as Alexander goes, well, that was what Daniel wanted. That was for him and him alone. There was no greater good that comes into the equation. It was purely a selfish want. An understandable want, but still selfish. And in the ending where you do nothing and let Alexander complete the ritual, well, it might be an ending Daniel deserves, but Alexander doesn't. Alexander wasn't human. We know that. And that may give him some leeway because he doesn't quite think the same way humans do. But does that fully excuse what he's done? I don't think so. In his memory capsules, we can see that he does know right from wrong. He does know how people would judge him. But he does it anyway, to get what he wants. I think it's fair to judge him the same way we judge anyone else who done the same. We also have to remember he did mention he was banished. Like I said before, this could just be flowery language, but if it isn't, why exactly was he banished? And as for the Agrippa ending, it's probably the least bad of the three. At least in this one, Alexander is dealt with, and Daniel gives his life to save another, instead of taking life to save his. Yes, he is sort of rewarded in the end, as it seems that part of him still lives, and Agrippa says it'll be alright. But he didn't know that would happen, so I still think it was a selfless act. Does it make up for all he'd done? I don't know, but it's something at least. I have to applaud Frictional for making a morally ambiguous protagonist, and really making me think about how I'd judge someone in those circumstances, and what I would do if I were in Daniel's shoes. So what's your take on this? What ending did you think was best, and what are your thoughts on the game overall? I'm definitely interested to see what you all think. Before heading off, I wanted to show this first piece of fan art I received for the channel. I love this, it's awesome, and I would love to see more. If any of you would like to show me some fan art, for now feel free to follow me on X and post it there, and I may show it at the end of future videos. And please, no NSFW. Alright, I've taken enough of your time, but if you've made it this far, you are the real GOAT. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe if you're so inclined, and if not, hey, I still appreciate the view. And I'll see you again on The Midnight Goat.